I think you heard it. So welcome everyone to our June meetup of the Berlin Droid, of the GDG Berlin Android. It's a virtual one again. We have again Slido for our questionnaire for the sessions. You can use the short link, just the code, or you can use the QR code. But also you still see the wonderful code later on all the slides. So you can ask your questions later on. At first, we will have Fanny, who tells us a little bit about developing with empathy the applications. Then we okay. We have Slido, yeah. We have a flea market, like always, where you can ask questions or ask for job opportunities, or someone can give a job opportunity. Afterwards, Adrian will explain us Jetpack Compose and why is it better. So he tries to convince us to jump over to Jetpack Compose. And you can apply for a code, for a talk. So if you also want to present like Fanny or Adrian, you can use the QR code again, or just talk.berlindroid.de. So to have the small ceremony from us, what I wanted to tell you. I think one slide I have forgotten, that's the one last week we started again with our co-learning Android, where you can meet in person at Xheim, it's a hackerspace. There are 2 rules. I think if you are doing it outside, you don't have to have a test. If you want to do it inside, you have to have a test like in a restaurant. I think currently Dirk is there doing it. So if you are interested, drop him a message or go to the channel which you have in our own Slack. I think that's for that. And again, the official one, the next meeting would be on the 28th of July this year. And with that, I would hand over to Fanny.
Thank you. So let me share my screen. Okay, is that okay for you? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Perfect. So hi everyone, I'm really glad to be with you today. So my name is Fanny. I'm a mobile developer and specifically Android developer. I'm also an organizer in France. You can hear in my accent. So I organize a meetup at GDG Lille, and also we created in France a group with all Android user group, and we organize online events also. And I host also a podcast where I talk about accessibility, tech for good, and stuff like that. But today I don't want to talk about myself, but I want to talk to you about Manuel. Manuel, I had the chance to meet him during the podcast I'm hosting. He is blind, and he shared with me his experience with his smartphone. And today I want to share with you a few things, a few parts of that discussion. The first thing I want to share with you is how some apps that are really useful to him, not the way that we expect at the beginning. Let me share with you one example. We have an app in France called Yuka. I don't know if you have it in Germany, but basically this app is aiming to help you to know if the food you're buying in the supermarket is healthy or not, just by scanning the product barcode. Well, actually, Manuel used this app to know if the bottle he has in his hand, if it's a bottle of apple juice or orange juice. Another story that shared with me, Manuel, well, I mean, lots of stories he shared with me, show that there is not enough apps that are accessible to a blind person at the moment. And actually, I don't have statistic on mobile, but on mobile app, but I have the statistic on the web, and there is only 10% of the web which is accessible. And I don't think that we are better on the mobile side. And let's focus on one specific case, which is shopping application. In France, there is no grocery shop application that are accessible to him. If he wants to buy food and get delivered, he has to use his laptop on the web, and there is only one website that is accessible, which is, I think, really weird, because it should be easier for a blind person to buy grocery online rather than going to the supermarket. The last thing I want to share with you is how sometimes, well, how every time it takes lots of effort to try a new app for a blind person, and with no guarantee at the end that the app will be usable. And sometimes some apps are barely usable. That doesn't mean that the user experience is great, but it can at least navigate and by time learn how the page is structured. Use application called Deezer. It's a French. In this app, he cannot use the feature that allows him to share the sounds on an external device. For example, on his Google Home, this feature is not accessible to him. Let me share with you some key learnings I had after this discussion, and also after taking more time to understand how disabled persons they use their smartphone and what is accessibility. The first thing I want to share with you is that we should stop making assumptions. We should remove from our brain the sentence, but a blind person will never use my app, because it's always wrong. Trust me, every time it's wrong if you say that. And I've made that mistake before. For example, I worked before on an app aiming to help people who run. And I say to myself, okay, I don't have to make that much effort to make my app accessible, because blind person, they don't run, which is wrong, because they run just with someone next to them. The second assumption we should stop doing is thinking that disabilities impact a small number of persons. Actually, it impacts 1 person out of 5, meaning that in life, 1 person out of 5 will face or is facing disabilities. I don't know about Germany, but in France, during last Christmas with the pandemic, we were allowed to be only 6 at the table. So just imagine that at your table, there is at least 1 person that is facing disabilities or will face disabilities. And if we think a little bit more about visual impairment, the focus I want to take today on this talk, there is more than 200 million of persons that are visually impaired. Visually impaired, that means people who are blind or with low vision, which is almost the size of the USA population. Sorry, I do have trouble to change slides with the pop-ups. So now I wonder, you're saying to yourself, okay, how can I improve my app to improve those people's life, to improve people with visual impairment life? And also, although making an app more accessible implies doing things when you think of a new feature, when you design a feature, when you develop it, and when you test it. And there is lots of person involved to do that in a project. But today I want to share with you a list of best practice that I think are the responsibilities of the developers to make an app accessible. And today also I want to focus on visual impairment. The first thing you should know as a developer is know how to use Talkback. Talkback is a screen reader on Android. You can activate it by going into the accessibility settings of your phone. And there is also a really nice tutorial there. You can try it and you will understand all the gesture. But today I want to give you some explanation, just in case you're not doing that just after the talk. So the first gesture you have to know to use Talkback is how to navigate from one element to another element. So as soon as Talkback is activated, it will read your screen from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right. And it will give the focus on the first element on the left top. So here on this setting screen, it will say out loud, profile details, 1 of 10, double tap to activate. meaning 1 of 10 because it's the first element in a list of 10s. And here you can see the second gesture we are going to learn today is how to activate an element. So just double tap on it and it will perform the click action on the element. The third gesture I want to share with you today is the single tap. So before I was saying to you, okay, you can double tap. When you double tap anywhere on the screen. I forgot one gesture. Sorry. So the second gesture, sorry, is how to move from an element to another one. So just by doing swipe left or swipe right anywhere on your screen, you can move the focus to the previous element or to the next element. So here, if I swipe right, it will move to the next element, which is payment, 2 out of 10, double tap to activate. And back again to the third gesture. The third gesture is a single tap. If you want to go directly to one element on the screen, you single tap on it and it will give the focus to this element. It's really useful as a developer when you want to go quickly to one menu settings, you just single tap on it. Also, some people who are with low vision, they sometimes use toolback as an helper. So it's also a usage that they have. The last gesture I want to share with you is a configuration gesture, and it will help you to configure the second gesture I will show you. So if you perform like a V on your screen or a V the opposite way, it will open a menu where you can choose what will be the behavior between for the gesture swipe up and swipe down. So the possible configuration are, for example, headings, speech rate, or letter by letter. The letter by letter configuration can be useful, for example, for blind person to read a password letter by letter. So let's, for example, pick the configuration to headings. And now on my settings screen, if, for example, I'm on the element your app's language, and in my code, if I've said, okay, that's a heading, well, if I swipe up, it will move to notification. If I swipe down, if there is another heading, it will move to the next heading. Okay, now that we know the basic gesture of fallback, let's see how to improve the user experience in Android using Jetpack Compose. The most important thing you have to do to make your app accessible is to add content description to all images. If you don't do that, your app become completely inaccessible. It's the most important thing. So let's take, for example, this shopping app. Here we should add content description to this t-shirt, so a blind person is able to know if this t-shirt is a black t-shirt. Otherwise, he will be able to know that, but he will have to move 8 elements after to just move to t-shirt with cutout styles, which is quite long. So to do that, it's really easy. With Jetpack Compose, you have an image element, and you just add in the content description, you add the content description of the product. And actually, Jetpack Compose is great because it forces you to add this information. Well, when before, when we were using images, we were not forced to use content description. So please don't put null. Think before if you want to provide some information to the user. Also, another part of the screen where we should definitely add content description is the small images that allows the user to pick the t-shirt of the color of the t-shirt, sorry. If we don't do that, a blind person will not be able to pick if we want a white t-shirt, a black t-shirt, red t-shirt. It will just say no description, double tap to activate, but double tap to activate what? Okay, next advice is that sometimes it can improve the user experience if you hide decorative images. Let's take, for example, this pet sitter application. Here it's a narrow screen, and although the dog is really cute, if we want to improve the user experience, we should say to Tollback, don't give the focus on the dog image. And to do that, we just put null in the content description. And Tollback will move directly to the next element, which is oops. Next advice, still in our pet sitter application, sometimes in app, we should improve the element description because let's take, for example, here the daily rate for this pet sitter. And we see here it's written $16 per day. We say it's $16 per day, but it's written $16/day. So if we do nothing, for a blind person, the talkback will say $16 per day. And it could be nice if we can improve the user experience here by just adding the modifier semantics. Semantics is always the modifier you will use with Compose to improve and to manage accessibility. And here we had content description, and we can improve here the message. So as a rule, we can do that when we pronounce out loud something differently, or when the content is implicit by other non-textual element in the screen. Next advice is sometimes it can be really, really useful to improve the user profile going through one. It will be here. What we can do is, for example, group some sections together. Here we have, for example, sections that says no pet, house, and that the pet sitter has a car. So what we should do here, we just on the main row of the in Jetpack Compose, we always had modifier semantics and had the property merge descendant. And automatically, fallback, instead of say giving the focus to no pets, swipe, house, swipe, car owner, swipe, will say no pet, house, car owner, just at once. One next advice I want to share with you is that sometimes it can be really useful to change the reading order. Let's take this example. It's my Gmail application, and there is the Fab button that we all like as the Android developer. But just imagine that behind this Fab button, you have an infinite list. And as I told you, Talkback will give the focus from the top to the bottom, from the left to the right. So basically, it will first go to search in emails, and then on my first email, second email, and go on, go on, go on, go on. And I will never be able to access the create new email button, which is like the basic features of the app. So here, a good idea could be to change and influence the reading order of Talkback. Actually, on Jetpack Compose, there is still an issue, and it's not possible to do that. I've created an issue, and they are working on that, and I hope that it will be fixed before the end of July when they will release Jetpack Compose. But before Jetpack Compose, let me explain how to do that with XML. So you just had two properties, accessibility traversal before and accessibility traversal after to our Fab button. This way, we are saying to the Fab button, okay, you are getting to be read after the profile picture, but before the mail list. Okay, next advice is sometimes you can facilitate navigation with headings. And it's not something, it's something really new in Android. It was released in Talkback 9.1, and it's something actually that blind person are really used to on the web. On the web, you know, we use H1, H2, H3, and this allows them to quickly understand the structure of the pages and to navigate more quickly. You know, you remember with the swipe up and swipe down. So you should provide this great feature in your app. If you have like a list with section, well, you just have to add modifier semantics and heading, and it will allow the user to perform swipe up, swipe down to navigate more easily in your app. Last advice I want to share with you is that sometimes it can be useful to disable some elements and to override the behavior to describe the element state, for example. So let's take this example here. If we do nothing on this list, so Talkback will give the focus first on profile detail, then we swipe right, it will give the focus to the switch button, and then to the all row. So a good idea could be that Talkback give the focus to the all row, just at once and able the user to perform the switch on the all row. So to do that, we had the modifier clear and set semantics. It will allow us to override the behavior. Then on our row, we will have to use the switch state action on the clickable action on the row and add a semantics with the state description, because switch is actually managing a state, and saying to Tollback, okay, regarding the state, you have to say on or off. And this way, Tollback will say profile detail on, and if we double tap, profile detail off. And of course, on the switch button, we still have to have the event when the element is checked, because it's also used by non-disabled person. And we also clear and set the semantics. So the focus is, yeah, I've said that before. So the focus is not given to that element because the behavior is managed by the all row. Actually, if you go to the documentation of Jetpack Compose for accessibility, they take this example and they say to use custom action. But actually, custom action, to activate a custom action, you have to perform a L on your screen. It opens a new window with several options. And here you have action, you pick action, and then you find your action here. And I don't think that it's easier to do that rather than doing 2 swipes on your screen. I rather recommend you to do that in this situation. Okay, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to go further about accessibility, well, accessibility is not about only visual impairment. It's also about cognitive issue, about motor issue and hearing issue. So if you want to really learn more about that, you can read MDN documentation. Check out the documentation also of Jetpack Compose and really try to understand how disabled person use apps. And if you can find users of your apps that have disabilities, it's great, try to understand. And the thing you should do just after is try Tollback on your phone. And if you want to stop Tollback because you're lost, you don't know how to go back to normal, you just press volume up and volume down at the same time, and it will disable Tollback. Thank you for your time. And if you have any question, feel free to ask them. And also, if you can provide me some feedback on this link, I will share it on the chat after. It will be really helpful to me also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fanny. I think I jump over to my presentation for the slides at least. So you can.
Yeah, I can stop.
I hope everyone, no, that's the wrong one. I don't love you soon for now. Let's see if I can manage it. And there we go. So if you use the Slido, you can ask questions or you can open your mic how you want. But Slido is also anonymous. But like I said, thank you very much, Fanny. I think it's quite interesting that also you can do it easier than beforehand with Jetpack Compose.
Yeah.
I hope we will also use it in future a bit more. At least I am highly interested into all this stuff. Will you share also the slides later on for us so we can publish them to our community?
Yeah.
You can do it yourself as well.
Share them if you want on the Meetup page. Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
No, and on Twitter, for example.
Yeah. Okay, there comes the first question. Did you identify any UI components which should have the default behavior being changed for the sake of accessibility?
Did you identify any? It really depends on your UI. I gave you one example. I tried to think of another one, but basically every time you have custom components, you should probably provide them or override the behavior. But let me think if I can find another example. For example, I haven't done that on Jetpack Compose yet, but I had a really specific menu at the bottom that were custom menu. And if you have to group element, you have also to override the fact that talkback will say selected or unselected, and also override the fact that it's the first element in the menu out of 5. So yeah, if you're building your own menu with a nicer menu, well, you should override the behavior. I cannot hear you.
I should open the mic, I think. Thank you very much for the answer. I hope that answered the question. Any other questions, or you can also type no question if you want to dig a little bit deeper into the question. It's an anonymous person.
Can I really quickly ask a question?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you very much for your talk. That was really, really interesting. It's just, I've got a question about the clear and set semantics thing. Yes. I'm just a little bit confused by that. So in your use case, it sort of took the focus away from the individual view component and put it higher up. But I guess, could you just go over that a little more?
Actually, when you put clear and set semantics, as I put nothing into the curly braces, but just say talkback, don't focus on that element. And then what I've done is performing the action outside of that element. So I've done everything on another component in the row element. But you could say clear and set semantics and override in the curly braces some configuration. It depends of your use case.
If you didn't, sorry to follow up, if you didn't set, so if you did the clear and set semantics like you did, and you didn't set anything at the row level, what would happen there?
The user wouldn't be able to play the action on the switch. It will also only give the focus on the row. So I don't remember what was the row, but the focus on the row, and then it will move to the next row. A blind person wouldn't even know that there is a switch button on this row.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Really cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have some questions, or also one? Three, 2, 1.
0. Well, thank you. We cannot hear you, Hassan.
Yeah, he's muted.
I hate myself.
It was a 3, 2, 1 to no, Hassan.
Yeah, I should learn to use the keys properly. So thank you very much, Fanny, for.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure to have you here. Stay with us.
Yeah.
Probably later on we will have also some more relaxed questions, if not surprises one. So I just jump over to our flea market. I explain it again. So you ask questions. You can ask questions to the audience if you have some things where you think you want to solve something, or you say you search for a job or you offer a job. Feel free to open your mic. I think that should be working for everyone. So you can give us some words. And if not, we just jump over to the next session. So
there's a question. Will there be an in-person Android meetup soon? Do we know?
To be honest, I won't think in the upcoming future because of the regularities, because we have to create an hygienic concept and all this stuff. And I think it's way too much work for just 20 people. So one which is done by our weekly meetup, by the co-working area or the hackerspace, that's handled by the hackerspace itself. and not by us, the regular live trace. I don't know if we can do it in the C-base, but even other companies, I think most of the companies still doesn't have the allowance to do that. To
We should
say,
have,
sorry?
should have drinks again after the meetup.
Yeah. So that's why I rather would, for now at least, say no. Let's see what happens in the autumn. Or yeah, we will see. It have to be organized also. And currently most of the organizers are quite heavy into the working stuff. And some people took sabbaticals for some weeks. So it's not the easy one for the remainers. Just to say it like that. And the easiest currently to do it virtually. Also, we get some more speakers because we don't have enough people sending in papers or presentations for the people from the local side.
We could have virtual speakers and real meetings.
No one stops you to do it personally, right? Doing it on your balcony or on your terrace. Yeah, but the official answer is for now not. Other questions, even not for the organizers? If not, I will really hand over to Adrian.
There's a question from Benjamin.
Sorry,
Joy Berlin is in October.
Wait a second. Wow.
Benjamin, do you want to just?
Oh yeah, sure, that's fine. I don't know if Flea Market was a space just for like discussion or not, but DroidCon Berlin is apparently in person in October. I'm super stoked and excited and hopefully going. Is anyone else?
Yes.
Probably, yes.
I think a
Yeah.
lot.
And do we think it will be in person?
At least the organizing teams, the DroidCon team plans definitely in person. So it's not that it's a backup to be in person, that they really plan this in person and hope that in October the numbers are hopefully that more people are vaccinated. And we will see really. Also, a lot of other companies have a lot of meetups around this area. So it won't be easier for us. Let's see and hope the best. But we have the planning with the program committee and all this stuff currently set up. And we're waiting for the call for papers from the people who are sending in talks. So
Hassan, are you involved in DroidCon Berlin?
I'm part of the program committee for selecting the talks.
Cool.
And also I'm quite familiar with the organization team since the beginning of the DroidCon nearly. So we are quite, at least also our group itself is quite connected with them. That's why we have good connections there. But I can't talk officially for them, so it's just from the people I know.
Can't get you on the record then.
Because I'm the one who will upload it later, I can cut it out. Nevertheless, sorry, Adrian, I let you wait. Will you want to take over?
Sure. Or was this question, opinions, Jetpack Compose versus Flutter? Is it also something for this flea market or?
No, I think this was for during the session itself.
Okay, so I share my screen. So I hope that worked.
Looks good.
Super. So hey everybody, I would like to talk about Jetpack Compose. Sorry, my voice, I was ill, but I think I can do it. Yeah, actually, I started using Compose quite early already with the alpha and used it a lot. And I'm a big fan, and I would like to give some introduction for some basics and also show you what I believe is better now with Jetpack Compose and what problems you had with legacy Android, how I will call it from now on. So Jetpack Compose is basically built on composable functions. This would be an example of a composable function. You can see that it has this add composable annotation. It's a little bit similar to suspending functions in Kotlin. So there's some magic happening under the hood. You write it with a capital letter usually. So this is a counter composable function here. And basically this function is just showing this button. And when you click on the button, you increase it by 1. This is all this function is doing basically. So now I would like to go like through the parts of the code we're seeing here. So the first important part is this remember function here. So I made a simpler example, which is this one, which shows you what it's doing. So if you call this composable function counter, remember it's also called, but each time it gives you the same number back because mass random is only called 1 time. So remember basically is caching the result. To make this more clear, I have here another example. Like if you have an input parameter, like here we have a Boolean, and then we can pass some key or multiple keys to remember, and it will check. Let's say, for example, we pass in true, then this mass random gives us a number and saves it in this variable. And each time we pass in true again, so the value is not changing, it will give us back the same number again. So it will not evaluate this lambda again, just if the key is changing. So if we, instead of true, passing later in false, it will again execute this lambda and give us a new number back. So this is called in Jetpack Compose memorization. And yeah, you can just say it's caching the result of a function depending on the input of the function. And the second aspect from Jetpack Compose, which is quite important, is mutable state. I also marked it here in the function. You can create mutable state by calling this factory method here, mutable state of, and you just pass in an initial value. In this case, just 0. And then we save it in our counter variable. And also it's only created once, the instance, because we do it inside the remember. And yeah, now this mutable state helps us to update only the parts in the UI which are needed. To make this a little bit more clear, I draw a little bit a traditional UI hierarchy, how you know it. Looks like this. Some views, and then we have again the counter, the button, and the text here. And usually a UI hierarchy goes like from top to bottom, so always going through the children, just like this. But Jetpack Compose is smarter than this. So Jetpack Compose is aware of state. So we have here in our counter, we have this mutable state, which we declared. We call it counter, and it starts with 0. Our text is reading this state. And Jetpack Compose is aware of that. It knows that text is reading this state. So if we now click on the button, our mutable state gets updated and gets a new value. Now Jetpack Compose knows, okay, my mutable state changed, so I will have to update all the composable functions which are reading this state. So it will not like draw all or execute all the view hierarchy again, but just the composable function which are reading the state. And this process is called recomposition. So this is more or less the basics of Jetpack Compose. Now I put this old book, which I like, and I want to show what Jetpack Compose improved compared to legacy Android. And usually I really like these old books. They have this old coding guidelines, which sometimes are still relevant. And I believe this one, duplicate observed data, which is from this book, is still very relevant and actually is part of the principles of Jetpack Compose. And I want to show you how. So in Android legacy, we had, for example, a checkbox, and the state is checked here, was baked into the checkbox. So it's part of the view, the state. And if we now need this state also in our business logic, then we probably have it also in our view model, meaning we have the state 2 times. And what we want usually to have is we want to have a single source of truth, meaning we want to have the state only 1 time. Because otherwise it can be complicated for our code and we have to synchronize the states with each other. With legacy Android, it was not really possible because it was baked into the view. Now with Jetpack Compose, we can apply this refactoring and we can move the state in a higher architectural layer. Here, And in the lower architecture layer, we can just observe it. And now and this is called in Jetpack Compose state hoisting. So now I want to show you how this is done in code. So here, this is a composable function to draw a checkbox. It has two mandatory parameters. One is checked, which is just taking true or false, depending if it should show the checkbox in a checked state or not. And then it takes this on check change, where you just pass a lambda. And you can pass an empty lambda, and basically nothing will happen if you click on the checkbox. It will not change anything. Only if we pass here true or false, it will change. So what we're doing is we're just passing in our state in this lambda, changing it, and then it will recompose, execute this composable function again, and here pass in the updated value. So our state is outside of our composable function. And like this, we can move it in higher layers and share it if needed with other components, which also needs the state. So I put another old book. Because this book really showed me many things which are wrong with the Android toolkit, UI toolkit. And recently I heard a nice fact about this design patterns that actually it comes originally from architecture. There was some architect called Christopher Alexander. He introduced design patterns to architecture, and software developers, they basically copied the idea. And they were writing this old book from 1995. And what I really liked about the book was the first chapters. In the first chapters, they are showing how to build a UI system, and they're showing all the challenges. And I could really understand what are the challenges also in Android these days. And also they gave some good solutions, which were clearly done wrong in Android. And one pattern they're introducing is a composite pattern, which basically says that each UI element should have a common type. So in Flutter, for example, they really nailed this. In Flutter, every element is a widget. Everything is a widget. In Jetpack Compose, you can say everything is a composable function. And in legacy Android, everything was a view. Just the problem is, in legacy Android, our building blocks, the views, they became way too big. And one reason, what I believe why this happened is because they overused inheritance. And maybe you've seen this yourself in some Android code bases when you have some base activity, and with the time it becomes this God class and it becomes way too much responsibilities. And the same happened also in the Android code base with, for example, text view or with view.java. And one of the biggest issues with inheritance is that it has a very tight coupling. One of the best explanations with the problems of inheritance and this tight coupling I found in Effective Java, which I would really recommend about this topic. And the solution is already in Effective Java and already in this old design patterns book to use composition over inheritance. And this is something which is Jetpack Compose clearly is following a lot. Another thing which is Jetpack Compose is following is also to have very small building blocks. There's also one coding principle, which is quite famous from the solid principle, interface segregation principle, telling us to make small interfaces to have very small building blocks. And to have very small building blocks, what would be the smallest building blocks we could have? It's functions. So this is why it makes totally sense for Jetpack Compose to use functions, because now in Kotlin, we have higher order functions. And like this, we can easily combine functions and inject them into each other. And this is done, for example, with a button in Jetpack Compose. Very often you find these placeholders, like a button itself doesn't have any content. It just has a mandatory on-click parameter. But if you want to have some children inside your button, you can just add in this placeholder what you want to have, like here, for example, text. And I put here a simplified composable function of a button. So you have this mandatory on-click parameter. Then you have a modifier. Modifier is basically a list of modifications which you can apply to every composable, like padding, for example. Then you have some specific parameters to button, like shape and colors, which have default values coming from the material theme. And then the last parameter is this placeholder for the content or for the children of this composable. So here we can have a composable lambda because composable functions can only call from other composable functions. And like this, we can just place as a content whatever we want and are super flexible. So we can also just have a button instead of a text having an icon as a content. And this technique they call in Jetpack Compose slot API. So this was it. Yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you liked it. And yeah, feel free to connect if you want to talk about Jetpack Compose on Twitter. I should stop sharing.
Thank you very much.
I'm sharing.
We are still, but I take it over now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if you have any questions, please use Slido or directly the voice before I mess up with the chat again. We will take over the question afterwards, which sorry for just jumping over it. I didn't saw that there was a chat question as well. Then any questions from anyone? And I promise I will be silent if there will be a question. Otherwise, I talk till the end of the day. Dum, 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 dum. By the way, Adrian, will you give us the slides as well? Provide us a link where you can.
Sure. Can do that. Yeah.
Okay. So there was one person who loved to use the chat instead of Slido. And his 2 cents is web frameworks like Vue.js use the slot paradigm as well. Thanks, Toby, for this information.
Actually, this is also interesting for me, like how much, like I'm not too much into the web world, but like when you see React, I think all the stuff which you have with Flutter and SwiftUI and Compose, it's all influenced much by React, I think, right? So we have much from the web world coming there. Like this one guy, Richardson, who's now at the Compose team. Basically, he was one of the big influencers in the React community before, right?
I don't know what web is. It's different language, how we can talk in Android about it. Anyone more Android question? I think for the people who doesn't know, currently Jetpack is in beta and July it will be live for public 1.0 as far as I know. That's the first time they announced something at Google I/O or the virtual I/O with a date, with a public date, public live date. I hope the person doesn't get fired for it, but
I think originally they thought about having the deadline as Google I/O, right? And I think it's really good that they didn't stick with this fixed deadline Google I/O, but said, okay, we will just take it how long we need now.
Yeah, just a little bit around it. I think in the most cases they announce the beta during I/O, and when the final version comes out, comes the final. So the final version of Android comes out, so it's normally end of the year. Then the final version of the others come as well. At least for now, in most cases was like that. From what I remember from the past bigger announcements. Of course, there was nothing like Compose at all. So it's really the biggest Android change in the last decade, I would say, for all the people. So then we can start flaming with Flutter, I think, if there's no question for Adrian.
Can I quickly ask one again?
Jump on.
Sorry about all the questions. Adrian, that was really wicked talk. Can I ask you probably quite a difficult question? What is the weirdest or hardest thing that you've come across when composing? Like what's one of the big sort of gotchas or just one of the things that was like, ugh, what was that I just did when you were writing Compose?
There were actually a lot, I think, but I have to remember now, it's tough. But I remember that there were situations like this for sure a lot. Like especially the state stuff was a little bit confusing for me at the beginning. Like when the state is updating.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
Sorry?
I put you on the spot there. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to remember this now because it's also like long time ago when I really looked into it. Like I made a little Compose break in the last month. But yeah, I think this paradigm shift, like, you know, with this state handling and also the functional thing, because I'm clearly coming from object-oriented programming, so this functional thing is something I'm not too deep into, yeah, and it's like also a little bit new for me. Like new techniques coming there, you know. Like for example, at the beginning, I was like, okay, how do I do dependency injection here? Right? No, they do it different here somehow. Yeah, you just inject the functions basically. Yeah, so it was. Or you have all of this and the service locator, I would say, this ambience, or I just call it now. Now they call it composited local. It was also something which I didn't get in the first place, I think. Or I was using it for dependency injection, I don't know. So it was a paradigm shift for sure for me. Many things which were new and different.
A small question was around. So Compose is backward compatible to API level 14, am I correct?
Oh, this question for me. Wait, for 14? I somehow have in my head lollipop. I'm not too sure. No, it's lower. 14 it could be lower. It's very low. It's low enough that you don't have to worry about anything. That's what I can say. Yeah, that's what I know for sure.
Not that I want to use any application to API level 14, but I think for people have to migrate to new stuff, they can say it's backward compatible more than 21. So you can really bring features as well and new UI to all the people with low-end device for the old devices as well. I can't say something about the performance probably for the low-end devices or the old ones. I hope it works quite good. But I think if you have a view with 3,000 or 6,000 lines of code, I think it will be definitely faster. Also from the rendering pipeline. Yeah, like I said, Adrian, thank you very much. And just jump to the question, which I be sorry again that I jumped over it. I thought it was a different one, and it was opinions on Jetpack Compose versus Flutter. What opinions do you have? Probably at first our speakers. Let's start with Fanny. Do you have any opinion on that topic? Are you here? If not, just come over to Adrian.
Yeah. So actually, I was considering when Flutter came out to switch to Flutter, and I partly did. And I wanted to become a Flutter developer because I really like it. Like architecture-wise, I found it way better than the legacy Android. But now with Compose, I found them at least even. I like Compose more because of the language, because of Kotlin. I don't like Dart so much. And yeah. Yeah, and also what's interesting is that as the Compose team I think they talked a lot with the Flutter team, so they really influenced them a lot. This is also, I guess, why it's such a similar thing. But yeah, I think both is great. I just prefer Compose because of Kotlin, I think, yeah.
I can go with that as well, but probably there are people who have different opinions on this chat. Or should I just stop the recording so we can talk freely? I also can do that if you want to. Just give me thumbs up, write something in this chat. Okay, there was a question. So I have a question. Do decisions makers on their teams, what is your plan to switching to Compose? Are here any people who can do these decisions for the team? Falco, I think you are one of them, or am I wrong?
Well, we decided to do it, but like technically we can just do it, but we need the reason, like start something new, refactor something. So it's not like product will tell us you need to do Compose now. And maybe one thing on the Flutter question, what I love about the whole movement is that you can start and also get influences from Flutter and take them over to Compose and the other way around, and maybe even like take iOS influences that are doing the same paradigm there. Kind of where the architectural, there's a 3 platforms architecture on the same road, and you can learn and influence each other and benefit from each other. And that's super cool.
Oh, you muted Adam.
Yeah.
Like I said, I hate myself. I can't
Yes.
blame someone else for that. So one more question for you, Falco. What do you think of Kotlin multi-platform with Compose, which there's also currently, I think, alpha or dev channel where they do Compose for Objective-C or Compose for web and also. So what would you rather do, Flutter or then KMM?
I've done a little bit of Flutter, and I would probably rather do Flutter because it's probably more mature than any of these other kind of cross-platform things. Flutter felt good in a sense where you didn't feel left out from Android, for instance. You can still jump into Android and do your stuff there. But any of the other, and I would count Kotlin multi-platform, Jetpack Compose might be like a little scratching your neck through your nose. I have no idea, but
Okay, any opinions from the audience? I think we have now 21, it was 24, I think. Anyone wants to say something? Okay, if there's no question, I at least stop the recording. So probably someone jumps on then on the train wagon. And I